Yeah.
There's a really cool at the moment, but you can probably see this
Mhm.
on your face. But I know you're in the office,
I know I'm
and
in the
there is
office and I've got
sun
sun. I've
coming
got
through. Yeah, you've got this kind of whoop around
I've, I've,
your
bec- I've
around your
become a
head.
little I've got, it's not really a
Hey,
halo, but I've got some interesting sun
you've got
dynamics
some,
going on
yeah,
over
you've
here.
got interesting lighting going on in the
Let's see.
office.
I think I need to move this way. It's the opposite way.
If you move that
Yeah.
way and down,
Yeah.
that's it. You're
There
gonna
we
have to
go.
you're gonna have to stay
I'll have
there.
to stay there, which is a
Otherwise, you
very
get this kind of framed face. It looks kind of cool.
it does look weird.
Yeah.
But I need to draw the drapes, which I should have done that before.
Oh, at least it's sunny. Is it sunny?
It's extremely sunny, which is
Really?
odd.
It's miserable down here. When I
Mm.
say miserable, I mean, I am in my office in the garden, which has a huge oak tree over the top of it. So any sunlight I should get, gone.
Oh yeah, well,
There you go.
well, this is UK weather, so just give it 2 minutes and it will change.
Yeah.
You'll have the sun and you'll have the rain. It's
Yeah.
just
Changes every 30 seconds. Hello again.
hello, Alex.
I seem to say that every week. Hello again.
Yeah, it's
Again,
true.
again.
Okay,
However
I know.
many times? What are we on? 6?
7.
5? 7?
We're on 7. Yes,
7 weeks of glorious podcasting.
7 weeks of talking heads.
Yep. Now I take it because I'm up here, but I take it on your screen we're side by side.
Yeah, it's going to be side by side. So
That's cool. It's side by side every week.
side by side. Yeah, yeah. It's
Not for me here, but then that's good because I get to see my head in a tiny screen.
yeah. It's sometimes it's best not to. It's best to focus on the content and not look at us. But it's just very hard to do that sometimes. Zoom,
Exactly.
you know what? I think Zoom is fatiguing because of that, because you have to look at not only the other person, but also your own self. And I think it has this mental overhead that you don't have in real life. So,
you haven't got a mirror image of yourself while you're talking to other people.
yeah.
That'd be horrible, wouldn't it?
It will be horrible. And
Wouldn't
that's
be
basically
nice.
what Zoom has created in
Yeah.
some sense.
Which is why I always have a little me up
Right.
there
Yeah.
as opposed to side by side because I don't have to look at myself.
Yeah, that's it. So we need to solve that problem at some point to be able to just see the other person's video as opposed to our own.
Come on, Zoom. You know what you need to do.
Yeah, some feedback from Zoom right there.
Nobody wants to see themselves whilst talking, particularly.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what's the topic for this week?
The topic this week is GCPs versus RTK versus PPK.
Ooh.
Yeah,
sounds like a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. So for those who don't know, GCPs are ground control points. RTK is real-time kinematic.
Okay.
And PPK is post-processed kinematic. Look at me with the knowledge.
There we go. Now it's even more of a mouthful.
Yeah, so we'll leave the title alone. These people know what it is, and it'll be written here somewhere anyway, so they can always refer to it.
Yeah.
So, what are GCPs versus RTK versus PPK?
Yeah.
Baron.
Okay. So these are all methods to improve the accuracy of your drone maps and 3D models. So as we all know, drones can be used to collect data, which can then be converted into a map or a 3D model, which is essentially a representation of the real world. But when it comes to accuracy, which is how accurate is the map or the model, we need to invest in other methods to be able to get high accuracy results.
Yep.
And there are 3 main approaches that have emerged over the last 5 to 7 years. GCPs, RTK, and PPK are those 3 methods. So in this particular pod, we will be going through each one of those methods, describing what they are, how they work, and comparing their advantages versus disadvantages.
Sums it up quite nicely.
There we go.
Yeah. Now people know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I guess that gives us the opportunity to talk about what each one is.
Yeah.
So we shall start with GCPs, ground control points. Now, whenever I used to write blog posts, I always used to get it wrong and write GPCs. And I know you had to correct me a couple of times. So, well, GPC, it's a GCP.
Yeah, I
So
think the problem is it's GCP, but it's GPS. And
that's
so,
probably where I was getting it wrong.
mm,
You see,
yeah,
so used to GPS,
yeah,
wasn't used to GCPs. So GCPs, waffle, GCPs are markers that are placed on the ground.
yeah.
They're usually like it's a square with sort of black and white markers on it.
Yeah. Hmm.
As we've said before, usually we might be able to put one of these up here on the screen, but we actually haven't gone around and done that yet. So maybe we'll do that this time, depending on our time constraints. So the drone positions itself using a base station and, well, actually, it measures the position of the survey of the ground equipment, so base station, etc. Don't know if you want to emphasize on that at all.
Yeah. So just to unwrap that, as you mentioned, it's a marker on the ground.
Yep.
And it's a marker with a very distinct set of colors, black and like high contrast colors, black and white, or I've seen like spiral ones, or
they vary, don't they? You can get different markers, but a lot of the most common ones are the black and white tiled squares.
Yeah. And the reason for those markers being so high contrast is because you want your drone's image to be able to easily identify those markers, because as we know, they're markers. And what you want to do is you want to know the position of that marker using a third-party method. So either you already know the position of that marker because someone has surveyed that before, or you have, for example, a base station or some form of a method through which you can understand the true location of that marker in 2D space. So basically, like every marker has you put one of the base stations at the center of these markers.
Yep.
And then you measure where is this in 2D space or on a map using a base station or similar. So you use survey grade equipment to figure out the real actual points where these markers are located on the surface of the Earth.
And once those points have been taken, you upload that data alongside your images to the processing software.
That's it.
And I mean, I have been on sites before where they have had GCPs, and I know you kind of sporadically put them around the site. You can put them at different heights. They can't be too close together, but as long as they are across the entire site in a varied amount, you'll get your definition of where they are when it comes to uploading that data to your processing software.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think the interesting analogy that I like to take is like if you imagine you had like a billboard and you wanted to place and there was a map on that billboard, and now you had a better map of a small area and you wanted to place it, but you were given like markers on where different points need to align. You would kind of try and stretch the map one way or squash it the other way to kind of make it fit on this billboard, sort of peg it in places. So these markers, GCPs, are essentially sort of the ground truth for where those points are in 2D space, those pegs on those billboard, and you're trying to kind of like match the map to the reality, and that's what improves accuracy.
Yeah, exactly. We see, cut a long story short, that is exactly how you'd improve the accuracy of your final result, whether that be a 3D map or a 2D map.
Yeah,
it gives you a better definition of what is on the ground and where it is in 3D or 2D space. Yeah.
But GCPs have been, I think that was probably like the first method that was used to improve the accuracy. I don't know if it was really the first, but we know commercially it was used a lot. Like 5-7 years ago is kind of the dominant method of doing things, but then since then other methods have come to the market. What are those other methods?
Hence the reason we're here talking about it today. So as it says in the title, which I'm not going to repeat because it's too long-winded and a mouthful, so the second method we want to discuss today is RTK, which stands for, as I said earlier, real-time kinematic. So this is a real-time method of collecting highly accurate data.
Yeah.
So the drone has an RTK unit, and it positions itself. We can go RTK on its own, but for accuracy, better using a base station. For the got an email pinged in my ear. Better using an RTK unit with a base station to increase that accuracy. So it positions itself using a base station and satellite.
Yeah.
So pulling real-time information from the GPS unit.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So I think this is kind of based on the idea of use many different sensors measuring the position at the same time. So I think the easiest way to explain it is that you've got a satellite, which typically is how GPS works, that measures the position of something on the Earth and stuff like that. You've got a base station. So you've got essentially, typically it could be a moving vehicle or it could be a base station in a fixed point, which is measuring its position. And then you've got the drone, which is also measuring its position. And the thing is, all three of them are connected into kind of like a triangulation fashion.
Yes.
Which allows for corrections to happen in real time for the positioning. Without going into the math for this, because it can be.
We do have posts on it.
We've got
posts on it if you want to go and have a real dig around.
True, actually, and we should probably put up an image from one of the posts. But essentially, the idea is that you have your satellites in space, you have your base station on the ground, and you have your drone in the air, and all three of them are connected, which allows for real-time corrections for the positioning, because triangulation allows you to sort of correct for positions and minimize the errors between them. So that's kind of like the summary for how RTK works. But as you said, it's a real-time method, which means that this is happening as the drone is flying. It's connected to the base station. The base station is connected to satellites, and the drone is also connected to satellites. And it's all happening
as you're out there collecting data in the field. I know from previous experience where we've been out with an RTK unit and a base station, that the base station sometimes doesn't like to connect or can take its time to connect, which of course is. It can be time consuming in the field if that happens. I know we were testing ours in central London, and we had to kind of keep moving positions to try and find a connection. If you're out in the wild somewhere like me down here in East Sussex, which is the south of England for those people that internationally listen, I probably wouldn't have as many problems because there's not as many obstacles for it to try and triangulate through. But trying it in central London, RTK, we did get a connection, but it took a while, and that's from the base station.
So exactly. So I mean, we're going to get to the disadvantages, or before we bash RTK too much, I think.
It wasn't an RTK bashing session.
No, it wasn't.
And I have jumped the gun a bit.
But that completely makes sense. Like RTK positioning, the signal, holding the signal is so important because it's a real-time method. The moment you don't have that real-timeness, you basically you can't really do much. The other thing is that the connection doesn't have to be with the base station. It can also be over the internet.
So again,
to a remote base station.
So that's that custom RTK. That is custom RTK, isn't it?
So it would be a network, custom RTK network. And the idea there is that your drone is connecting still to a base station, but over the internet somewhere else, not in the field with you. But it's still connected. Same principle, but over the internet to a remote base station.
So again, we'll come to the advantages and disadvantages of that later.
Okay, sounds good.
Because we already know what the disadvantages and advantages are of custom network RTK. So our third method then, which would be PPK.
All right.
Which is post-process kinematic.
And
as the title says, it's all done after you finish.
It's
post-processed.
It is post-processed. There is an in-field component, we should say, but I think the actual corrections happen in the post. So it's correct to say that it's post-processing method. So post-processing PPK, the way that works is that you've still got your drone, your satellite, and your base station, but they don't have connections in real time with each other. I mean, you still have the satellite connected to both, because you need the drone to fly with GPS. So you need the satellite connected to the drone. But you don't have a real-time connection between the base station and the drone. They're logging their positions sort of separately, individually, still in the field, but not connected to each other.
They're kind of logging them manually, aren't they? By themselves.
Yeah, by themselves, individually, separately. And then what you do is that you take all that data and you put it into a software in the post, which then generates the corrected positions for you. So similar to how you would take the GCP positions and you would upload them to a software, which would then make the map the right place. This is similar in that way, that you put it into software, which then corrects the position for you, so that you have more accurate maps and models. That's kind of PPK, I guess, in a nutshell.
Yeah, in a brief, wrapped up fashion. Mm-hmm. So I guess there's our three methods of collecting accurate data. Mm-hmm. GCPs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, GCPs, RTK and PPK.
Yeah.
So what are the advantages of GCPs?
What are the advantages of GCPs? Okay.
One, I can tell you one.
Go for it. Yeah.
Doesn't require an RTK-enabled drone.
True. Actually, yeah. It's a very good point. GCP does not need RTK.
Nope.
Which is...
No, it just needs to be able to see that point on the ground from somewhere, I was going to say in space. From somewhere in the air, not in space.
3D space, air.
3D space, air. Yeah. Although who knows, the satellites that the Americans and the Russians have, they could probably see GCP markers on the floor. What else? Other advantages?
Well, I think that it's a relatively low cost method in terms of upfront investment.
Yep.
Because if you think about GCP, it's basically buying a whole bunch of markers and then putting them around the site. And then just having them a part of the data set that you collect, and then uploading a file whilst you're post-processing. So as long as you are happy to spend in time as opposed to money, I think that GCPs is a great approach from that point of view, because
there are GCP markers out there with GPS built in.
True.
As we discovered a few months ago.
True. Yes.
I went, why are these GCP markers so bloody expensive? Oh, now I know why. It's because they've got a whole lot of GPS kit built into them.
Yeah. So actually, maybe that should be the fourth contender. You have the smart GCPs and you have your kind of not so smart GCPs. I'm trying away from saying dumb GCPs, but
they are. It's like a dumb terminal in PC terms. They don't actually do anything. Yeah. They're just a method of enabling something else.
Yeah.
So, and they're also a good fallback if nothing else works.
Yeah, and
you can in your back pocket.
Yeah, and you can create your own GCPs if you want to. It's basically just a marker. You could use spray paint if you wanted to, if you could actually do that on the site without getting into trouble. So
a lot of people do. I know I've been out on sites where they might have several GCPs that they've already put out, and they've run out, so they just get a can of spray, like yellow spray paint, and go. Put a big circle with an X through it.
Yeah.
As long as the drone or the aircraft can see it, then it is another marker.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's very creative, because if you think about it, you could create these you can create them in real time when you're in the field, without having to kind of carry more equipment. Just basically a can of spray will do the job, if you can easily get rid of it later, of course. So,
I mean, if it's in a building site where they're going to concrete over, a muddy bit that you've sprayed it on, happy days. If you're spraying it on somebody's brand spanking new drive, they might get a little upset.
Yeah. Let's not make it graffiti.
No. Get Banksy along and do a nice piece that you can see from the air.
So that's the advantages. It's low cost in terms of upfront investment. It's relatively simple method. You can fall back on it. What are the disadvantages of GCP?
Well, you've got to traipse around the site and put these things down, right? So if the site's a massive site, then you've got a fair bit of trudging around to do, especially this time of year. If the site's boggy and wet and nasty, you might end up knees deep in mud. And the flip side of that is, once you've gone up there and collected all your data and spotted all your GCPs, you then got to go back out and pick them all up.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So it's time consuming. You've got to have access to certain parts of the site. And building sites some building sites are massive, and they may not want you going for safety reasons onto part of the site, which you need to get to because that's where you want to stick a GCP, right?
Yeah.
And they say no, and then you've got that whole rigmarole. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so spot on. You're basically paying time, and you don't know if you have access to those particular sites. And very good point. You have to actually, when you're done with the drone survey, you have to go and then collect them all up.
Yep.
And you have to make sure nobody moves them whilst the survey is going on.
Moves them or runs over them. A lot of these places have big plants, as they're called, the big machinery.
Yeah.
And they, you can get a digger or whatever, drive straight over the top of one. It will just bury it straight in the ground. Then that's your GCP gone, or covered in muck, so that so you can't pick it up properly.
Those are the disadvantages. And also you need to still do the post. It is a post method, so you have to do all of your actual corrections in the post, done by software, of course, but it's not that you're leaving the field with accurate data. But it's still one of the earliest methods that was sort of created for the cause, and it works.
And on a nice sunny day in the middle of August, you won't want to be wandering around plonking these things down, as long as you get run over by a pickup truck or whatever. It's quite nice. Just pop that one there, chuck that one there, lovely, pop that one there. When it's the middle of February and it's -2, blowing a howler, you've actually even if it's windy, you've got to pin these things down, so it's even more time.
True.
So you end up with your GCP flying off somewhere, and then it's lost or gone.
Yeah, and in our industry, I think weather is such an important consideration for almost everything we do. So that just falls completely in line with GCP management as well. So
GCP bashing. We've just done it there. We've bashed the GCPs.
Yeah. So moving on to RTK.
Yeah, advantages of RTK. No post-processing needed.
Yeah.
It's there. It's in real time. So as the title explains, the drone positioning is precise. So it increases safety aspect.
Yeah. Because not only it's not just that your map or your 3D model that's coming out of the other end is accurate, but also like your flight is more accurate as well. And you can get up to millimeter level accuracy, which is what at least DJI publishes on their drones. And I think if you're in a site with very, very, you're in close quarters with lots of things, and you don't want to hit anything, or if you're doing something with a hill involved perhaps, and you have very little clearance, I think having RTK helps with that, as long as you can maintain connection. And sometimes the two of them are exclusive, like you can only get high quality connection, or you can get RTK. But that's the safety side of it is a very good point.
Less time on site and less post-processing. Because the data will be more accurate.
No GCPs to go and pick up after the survey.
No 2 foot of mud to trudge through, or having to negotiate diggers and pickup trucks.
Pretty much
likes to do.
So
right,
that's great. What about the disadvantages?
Let's bash RTK
now. Bashing time.
Give them a bash. You're at the mercy of this signal. or in the case of custom network RTK,
Yeah.
have you got an internet connection while you're on site?
Yeah.
You know, how long's it going to take for your RTK base station to pick up a signal?
Yeah.
You could be stood around for ages. Are you going to lose signal while you're up there? Is RTK going to pop its clogs while you're flying?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
As you know, as I said, it requires a base station or an internet connection.
Yeah. So that's absolutely true. You've got additional hardware that you've got to take to the site. You've got all these connections to set up. You don't really know how long it's going to take before you set all these up.
Yep.
What if one of them fails, the connection fails during the flight? Starting everything all over again is just not an option in our industry.
You've got nothing to fall back on, unless in your back pocket you've got some GCPs. But then that goes back to the disadvantage of GCPs, right? You've got to go trudge around in the mud. So, yeah, I mean, it has its advantages. Great if you're out in the wilds, in some respects. But out in the wilds, if you're doing custom network RTK, you might not have a decent internet connection.
Yeah.
So it's weighing up the pros and cons.
Yeah, it's so use case dependent. But if you have the right site or location for it, and you've got the ability to carry the hardware and make sure you can connect, and all of those things are checkboxes for you, then it's actually the best method in terms of if everything else checks out. In an ideal world, it would be amazing for everything to be real time and everything to be done in the field itself, because then you'd spend less time in the post. But I think we don't really have an ideal world, and
as technology advances and you get the 5G network and whatever comes after that becomes more powerful and stronger, then yes, we'll be able to do this. But I'm not sure, I'm not sure the time, the timings of that or when that's going to be made possible.
Until then, we've got potentially PPKs to save the day.
Yes, which we should talk about next. So the advantages of PPK, which is post-process kinematic, as it says in the title, you don't need constant connection on site or instrumenting on site. Everything is done as it says in post. As they say in the movie industry, we'll sort that out in post.
So yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of things you do in the post anyway, right? So people are obviously doing a lot of work in the post, whether it's uploading the images for photogrammetry or for creating 2D maps or 3D models. So I think that one of the advantages there is that you can correct not only the positions for the GPS, but also things like lever arm corrections, which have gone out of fashion since the M600, because the M300, the payload and the GPS sensor are quite close to each other. But normally, like in the M600 days, you had a lot of
GPS up here, sensor all the way down here. I'm trying to fit myself on the screen, and you'd have to get the correction between the two to make the accuracy more accurate.
So exactly right. So that kind of a setup was a lot easier to do with PPK. Again, it's arguable whether or not that's relevant in today's time if people are flying more the M300s or other commercial drones. But so I guess the other advantages of PPK, which probably is also an advantage for RTK, is you don't have to instrument the site with all the all the muddy water stuff.
All the sludge and slop and getting run over. You don't have to deal with any of that.
You do need to invest in the right equipment. So PPK only works with, now this is a confusing point, but PPK only works if you have RTK enabled equipment. But it's not an RTK method because you don't need a connection between the drone and the rover or the base station. We'll clarify that later on. But basically, PPK, it's just easier for you to correct everything in the office.
So I would guess that's the advantages of PPK. What disadvantages PPK?
So it's obviously not a real-time method. So if you are doing anything that is safety related and you need your drone to be positioning in the right place and the corrections to happen in the field, then then you're basically relying on the RTK unit of the drone itself. And so I think if you really want to have real-time corrections, then obviously PPK is not a great method.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the cost outlay of the additional software, and often with that additional software, you will have to subscribe to someone that can supply you with the real-time information for corrections. I know I've certainly looked in the past at, so if I was to do something via PPK, how would I go about doing it? Oh, I have to get this information from these people at this cost, along with the software that enables the PPK.
Yeah.
So there's a cost implication there as well.
100%. Yeah. So you've got to get the post-processing software to be able to correct in the post, essentially take the RTK files data, which is saved on the SD card of the drone, from the drone and then from the rover, and then match all of that information to give you the right data for your images.
And as you've said, it's not a real-time method, but it does require an RTK bit of kit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Where's the sense in that? I know why, but yeah.
I mean, from an investment perspective, it is still more expensive than GCPs, because obviously you need to get the RTK enabled equipment to be able to do PPK, which means that you're very close to doing RTK because you have the equipment already. I think the only difference between RTK and PPK at that point is whether or not you have signal in the field.
Yeah, and I guess having an RTK, a bit of equipment that is RTK enabled, gives you the option to use either RTK or PPK.
Yeah.
You can even put some GCPs down if you want.
Yeah.
To mash it all up into one big, one big combo, make sure they're ridiculously accurate. So,
yeah,
there you go.
But then how do you decide? So now you got all these different methods. You got your GCPs, your PPK, your RTK, and also you've got your smart GCPs versus dumb GCPs. There's a lot to choose from, Alex.
It is. It's blowing my mind with choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, it's all going to depend on how much money you want to spend at the end of the day, doesn't it? If you're a startup, you're not. Yeah, you might want to get. You might have a vision to get an RTK bit of kit, but you might not require it at the moment. So you go, you know what? I'll start off with GCPs and see how I get on.
Yeah.
And if your workload becomes bigger and more people are requesting that you provide them with more highly accurate data, then you invest in an RTK unit.
Yeah.
With that RTK unit, then you then have the option to either RTK, custom network RTK, or even if you wanted to use PPK, again, depending on how much DOS you got in your pocket.
Yeah, that's it.
Budget.
It's budget, and it's also the use case, or your what's the word? Where you are in terms of your jobs and deliverables.
Yeah.
So if you're an in-house team at an enterprise and you want to do like 100 surveys a month, because that's what the enterprise is doing, and now you're doing all of it with drones, you can't afford to spend time. You got to spend money to be efficient. So in that sort of sense, if you really need to get the efficiency going, maybe you need to invest in the RTK equipment and get the PPK processing going as well. So again, depending on whether or not you have site access, and I think that's kind of like, it is so dependent on who you are as an operation and what levels of requirements you have from your customers or stakeholders.
I mean, there are teams out there that will use all three.
Yeah.
A combination of all three.
Yeah.
But it just, again, it all depends on where you are in the lifetime of your drone business.
Yeah.
Whether you're, a one-man band, sole trader, or whether you're a large enterprise unit.
Yeah.
It all depends on where you stand.
Yeah.
And depends on, as I said, how much moolah you have in your pocket or in your wallet.
Yeah. And if there is a need payoff for for that
Yeah.
budget. So if there is no need, then no matter, even if you have the budget, don't spend it. Spend it on something else.
Yeah.
Buy
a new car.
Buy a better drone.
Or buy a better drone. Yeah.
Buy a better camera.
Yeah, exactly.
I think not getting high. Firstly, accuracy. Does the application require accuracy, and how many times do you need accuracy in a month or a year?
Yeah.
These are some questions to really think through before you get into obsessed with one method over the other. And also, as we pointed out, some of the other questions, think about the sites you are doing or assets you're doing. Do you have full access to them? And do you like to do most things in the field, or do you like to
own a decent pair of wellies?
Yeah.
Have you got some waders for the winter?
Yeah,
because otherwise you're going to be trudging around in 2 tons of mud.
Yeah.
It all depends on the individual.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I think our recommendation would be, GCPs and PPK, depending on, if you've got a strong signal base area and you're working somewhere where you can, you have a reliable internet connection or there's reliable satellite information, then RTK.
Yeah.
There's no correct answer, really, is there?
There is no correct
answer.
That's
what we've finally decided in our little podcast here.
Yeah.
There's no right answer.
Yeah. But I think if you know your use case really well, and if you know your site, your equipment, your requirements, then there is a correct answer. It's just knowing those parameters to base your decision off of. Sometimes people don't spend a lot of time understanding those parameters.
No.
And I think people get obsessed by technology X versus technology Y. It's also driven by, people that are making the RTK equipment versus people that are making the PPK software. Obviously there are agendas that a lot of people are pursuing. But it's really important for the industry to really understand that it's about the use case and the actual requirements. And, the tool or the technology is just a part of it. Right?
Different use cases will have different requirements depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
There's a really cool at the moment, but you can probably see this on your face. But I know you're in the office.
I know I'm in the office and I've got sun
coming through. Yeah, you've got this kind of
I've become a little it's not really a halo, but I've got some interesting sun dynamics going on over here.
Interesting lighting going on in the office.
Let's see. I think I need to move this way. It's the opposite way.
If you move that way and down, that's it. You're gonna have to stay there.
I'll have to stay there, which
otherwise
is
you get this kind of framed face. So it's kind of cool.
It does look weird. But I need to draw the drapes, which I should have done that before.
Oh, at least it's sunny. Is it sunny?
It's extremely sunny, which is
really
odd.
It's miserable down here. When I say miserable, I mean, I am in my office in the garden, which has a huge oak tree over the top of it. So any sunlight I should get, gone.
Oh yeah, well
there you go.
Well, this is UK weather, so just give it 2 minutes and it will change. You'll have the sun and I'll have the rain. It's just
changes every 30 seconds. Yeah. So there you go. Well, nice little rant
about
GCPs, RTK, and PPK and their advantages and disadvantages and everything they do.
Yeah,
and what our recommendation would be.
Yeah.
Again, as we said, it all depends on your situation and your environment.
It does, yeah.
So we are. That's another week done.
That is another week done. And I think to anyone listening, if you are still undecided between GCPs versus RTKs versus PPK, I think that from our perspective, we have no incentive to sell one method over the other.
Nope.
But if you are really undecided, I mean, you can leave your question in the chat or the comments for this video. And us plus other people from the community might be able to give you more sort of pointers. If you wanted to get in touch with us regarding this topic, then we can also help you out. So our email address is team@hammermissions.com. And I'm going to try and get this sun fixed.
And obviously you can subscribe to our channel and give us a like. That's always nice. And we're also available on all your podcast directories as well now. And I think we had confirmation earlier, I'm not going to say from who, that we should have a guest in the next coming weeks.
Good point.
Would be nice.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
It'll be many more talking heads.
Yeah. Interesting to see what he, they, or she says.
Yeah.
And what that's, what we can talk about. We'll sort that out at a later date.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we've previously said, if there's anybody that wants to join us on our podcast for a chat, the more the merrier. Where we're more than happy to have guests or kind of people drop in. And on that note, I will bid you farewell, Varun, in your sunny office.
Likewise, Alex. I bid you farewell too, and hope to speak soon.
Yes, we'll catch up soon.
Catch up soon.
Nice one.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.